Hi everyone, I'm Uni Ravindranathan, and I lead program management for the team responsible for building some of the tools you might have used to build apps for Windows. Today, I'm super excited to show you some of the new experiences we are currently working to enable in our next release of Visual Studio 15, that we hope will make building apps for Windows even more fun and easy than ever before. I will only have time to show you a few of my favorite new X features, so let's get going right away. If you are a C#, VB, or C++ developer, you probably love making code changes when you're debugging and seeing those changes updated in your running application without having to stop, recompile, and restart the debugging cycle. In Visual Studio 15, we are going to be building upon our C# experience and bring this to XAML in a way that we think you would love. Let's see this in action. I have a Windows 10 UWP project loaded in Visual Studio, and let me start debugging. As the debugger is coming up, I just wanted to call out that I'm using a UWP project as an example. Everything I'm going to show today is also available for a WPF app. The first thing you'll notice when the application comes up is the in-app toolbar. The in-app toolbar allows you to toggle between selection modes. You could choose to either interact with the application, just like before, or you could now go into a mode that lets you select visuals in your application as you're working with the application. In this particular case, let's go ahead and select the button, the RSVP Now button, and switch back into Visual Studio. Visual Studio's live visual tree shows you all of the visuals corresponding to the application that is under the debugger. In this case, we have selected the button element, and that selection is reflected in the live visual tree as well. The Live Property Explorer lists all of the properties for the element that I just selected, and I can start making tweaks and seeing how the element looks when the application is running. For this demo, I'm not going to modify anything in the Live Property Explorer. Instead, let me go ahead and open up the XAML for this particular button. I can choose to synchronize my source, and Visual Studio now brings up the XAML editor with the XAML that I just selected already highlighted for me. In Visual Studio 15, you can start changing XAML and seeing those changes reflected in your application. Let's go ahead and set the font size for the button. Note, as I'm changing things, I'm getting full IntelliSense support. Let me go ahead and set the font size to 32 and switch back to the running application. And voila, the changes are reflected as I'm typing in my XAML editor. That's awesome. Let's go ahead and do a lot more than that. For just to make it easy for me to see what I'm doing, I'm going to take this application and dock on one side and Visual Studio and on the other side of the window. And let me get rid of all these extra panels so I can get full focus into my XAML editor. OK, let's start making some more fancy edits. Let's go ahead and change the grid to a stack panel. Of course, the application is updating, but you're not able to see anything because we haven't made significant changes yet. Let's add an extra element inside the stack panel, in this case an image tag, and I'm going to point its source to an asset that already exists in my project. MS-Apex assets mail.png. As soon as I close this tag, my application now updates in real time to show me the change that I just made. It's not looking pretty, so let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit more. Let's set the stretch of the image to none because it's looking too or uniform. And then give the image a height. I'm going to give it a height of a resource that I've already set in my project, in this case button height. Note how I'm getting full IntelliSense as I'm making these changes, all the way from simple properties to resources and bindings. OK, let's go ahead and give an orientation to the stack panel and set the orientation to horizontal, and also give a small background to the stack panel. Let's call it white. And set the horizontal alignment of the stack panel to center. Notice I'm getting real-time feedback as I'm making all these edits, and I'm able to make my application look better and better as I'm making these changes. One final edit I want to make, I'm going to set the margin of the image to 8. So let's go ahead and do that. 8, 0, oops, 0, 8, 0. And there you have it. All using XAML Edit and Continue, I was able to make my application look good without ever leaving my debugging session. But the fun doesn't end there. We can do a lot more. Let me go back to my application and get back into the mode where I'm interacting with the application and go to a different screen of the application. Over here, I have a list of photos that corresponds to the event that I'm currently seeing. I'm going to go back to the selection tool and select a particular item inside a data template for the list of items. As soon as I do that and go back to the live visual tree in Visual Studio, just like you'd expect, the selection is synchronized. I can navigate to source. So let me bring up the XAML for the element that I just selected. Let me get the live visual tree out of the way so we can see what's going on. And over here, I have my image tag. What I really want to do is set a little bit more space between these different items. So let me change the margin on the image to 4. And as soon as I do that, all of the data templates in my application now update in real time, again without me having to stop the debugging cycle, rebuild the application, and restart. How cool is that? So there you have it. Using Visual Studio's XAML Edit and Continue feature, you can make all sorts of changes to your XAML in the editor as you're debugging your application and see those changes reflected in the application without having to restart the debugging cycle. Moving on, as a company, we want to enable developers to build apps that are truly universal. Of course, we want our apps to run on every device we can think of. But equally important is that we want to enable our apps to be usable and friendly to people with disabilities. In this release of Visual Studio, you will see us do a lot of work to enable developers to build accessible apps. If you're running Visual Studio on the latest release of Windows 10, the very first thing you'll notice is that you can now launch an app for debugging under a special mode of narrator, so you can look for accessibility issues in the application that you're currently testing. Let's give it a shot. Going back to Visual Studio, in the Debug menu under Other Debug Targets, you'll see a new option called Debug App for Accessibility. Let's go ahead and use it. While it's coming up, and it's going to take a couple seconds here for the app to be launched into the debugger, let me just explain what's going on behind the scenes. In Windows 10, we have done a lot of work in the narrator, and what you're seeing here is the benefits that you're going to get from that. As soon as narrator comes up, the first thing you'll notice is the application is now blanked out, and that's by design. We want you, as the developer, to experience the application just like a person with visual disabilities would. And now you can only interact with the application not using mouse or touch, but using a keyboard. Let me hit Tab to go to a control in my application, in this case the RSVP button. Now I don't know if you can hear the audio, but narrator is reading out things as I'm moving through my application. That way I can know all of the accessibility issues and go ahead and come up with a plan to fix them. Previously, this would have been a very cumbersome process, but now you can isolate narrator to read just the app you're currently testing and not your entire set of windows in your current Explorer session. Notice also how the special mode of narrator allows you to view the app just like someone with visual disabilities would. And so you can then focus on interacting with the app and making sure that it works great when you're using keyboard navigation gestures. Now that we've detected what the problem is, let's try to fix it. Let me stop debugging my application or narrator and launch the normal debugger just like I would. Using the in-app toolbar and the selection tool, I can select an element that I know has an accessibility related issue, switch back to Visual Studio, select the element that has the potential accessibility issue, and one of the new features in Visual Studio 15 is a new category for showing all of the automation-related properties that I can inspect for possible issues. We map back the automation peers back to the elements that correspond to them, and you can inspect the values for the various automation peer-related properties, thereby making it really easy for you to fix potential accessibility issues in your application. In Visual Studio 15, we want to bring common issues that we find developers to be running into, be that performance, accessibility, localization, you name it, right to your fingertips so you can take action. Some of these previously would have required a lot more time for you to detect, deep knowledge of the platform, and would have required you to use a number of our tools to get to the bottom of. Let's see this in action. Let's launch the app into the debugger. And let me work with the application a little bit. In this case, I'm going to bring up the menu and look at all of the subsections in my particular application. Let me switch back to Visual Studio and look at the Diagnostic Tools window. In the Diagnostics Tool window, in the Events section, I'm now seeing an entry, List View is not virtualized. I wonder what that is. Let me double click and bring back my XAML editor. Oh, there you have it. There was a list view in my application to which I had applied an items panel, and I had not really virtualized that particular items panel. That breaks virtualization. Let me fix it. So I'm going to stop debugging, go back to my XAML editor, and remove the items panel template completely. Let's restart the debugging session. And hopefully, if everything works, if I go back to Visual Studio and look at the Diagnostic Tools window, my event section is now empty because I've fixed a potential performance issue in my application. While not in the preview release of Visual Studio 15 that we're making available today, future releases will also allow you to take common actions for these issues. For example, for a performance issue we might have detected for you, we'll help you bring up the timeline tool with the right subsection of the application runtime profile selected so you can quickly understand and fix the issue. Let me finish by showing a couple of small improvements we have made to Blend for Visual Studio. Some of these items have been on our backlog for a very long time, but hey, better now than never. Over here, I've opened up Blend for Visual Studio in the Visual Studio 15 product. And I'm going to select an element, and I'm going to bring up the Resources tab. One of the new capabilities we have added in Blend for Visual Studio in Visual Studio 15 is the ability to search for resources. I can just put my cursor here and look for button height. And there you have it. I'm seeing all of the resources that match my search criteria, thereby allowing me to wade through a large number of resources, narrow down on the one that I really wanted, and make changes to it. These are just a few of the new features that you will see in this early preview of Visual Studio 15. We'll have a lot more by the time we are done. Download Visual Studio today by going to visualstudio.com. You can also get the project that I was working with by going to the URL on this slide. If you ever need help, send us an email. Otherwise, build an app in Visual Studio and have some fun. Thank you.